Hello, I'm David Little.
And I'm Jill Gittins. Welcome to Podcast 5, The Great Reformer Continued. In this, there is a review of homeopathy and psychology based on our book, The Homeopathic Compendium, Volume 5, Constitution, Temperament, and Maps of Consciousness. Now, the Maps of Consciousness part is a 400-page study of ancient and modern psychology in all of its aspects. There's an emphasis on the works of Carl Jung and, of course, the homeopathic approach. Now, Volume 5 is a companion volume to Volume 6, Materia Medica of Psyche and Soma. These two are companion volumes, and a lot of the information that is explained in Volume 5 you will also find as reference material in Volume 6. All right, now the next area we were going to look at was mental health reform.
From the earliest years of Samuel's career, he was interested in the humane treatment of the mentally ill, and from 1792 to 1802, he dedicated part of his time to the care of patients with psychological disorders. In 1792, he opened an asylum for the mentally ill, where he used humane treatment, what in the day they called moral treatment, psychology, and homeopathic remedies.
Right, he was given a case of a very important nobleman called Clockenbrink, whose mental health had completely broken down under stress, and he wrote an article about this. This is what my notes say. Hahnemann cured a nobleman named Clockenbrink, who suffered from psychosis with illusions of grandeur, mania, hysteria, and OCD. This experience was published in Description of Clockenbrink in 1796.
Jill, would you give us a little bit of this description, just from your memory?
Yes. Oh, well, the poor fellow. Well, for example, delusions of grandeur. He would whisper in everybody's ear how he was actually the favourite confidant of various of the most important people in the world, kings and princes and so forth, that he was, their special friend. He said that he had love affairs with princesses and that he knew all these important people and so on and so forth. But then sometimes he would get very angry. Sometimes he would weep and be disconsolate. Sometimes he would shred all his bedding and clothes with his fingernails. And then sometimes he would quote at length and from memory all sorts of works, classical works, and as if he could remember all these things really, really well, but the context was a little crazy in which he was doing this, as he would just spout on and quoting out, Homer or something.
It's quite interesting, but in the Materia Medica, which describes this case pretty well,
Yes.
In the symptoms, Hahnemann mentions that 1/3 of his mental patients, 1/3 of mental patients, not even his, he thought all mental patients could be cured with veratrum album. And if you look at the symptoms that Jill just ran through, it's pretty obvious that that might be the remedy he gave him. Although he might have used more than one remedy over a period of time. We don't have a record of the remedies, but if that isn't a veratrum album case, I really don't know what is. And I've seen a few of them.
Now, I just wanted to say at the time that the treatment of what people called, the insane was cruel beyond belief. They were chained up, they were beaten and whipped, they were left in dirty cages and stuff like that. And of course, Hahnemann thoroughly disapproved of this inhumane and cruel treatment. Throughout his career, he continued to battle for more enlightened treatment of the mentally disturbed using psychology and homeopathic remedies. And in his letters to patients, he always took great care in matters related to rest, diet, hygiene, lifestyle, and psychology.
In 1792, Philip Pinel made his first experiment with unchaining deeply disturbed mental patients. And in 1796, he published his memoir on madness, in which he called for the humane treatment of the mentally ill. He is usually credited with being the earliest reformer of the treatment of the mentally ill. Actually, Pinel and Hahnemann were contemporaries, and both called for ethical treatment. So Dudgeon noted in his lesser writings that may we not then justify the claim for Hahnemann the honor of being the first who had advocated and practiced the moral treatment of the insane.
All right, so we see again that Hahnemann is a real pioneer and a real reformer in the field, and I think finally people are starting to look differently at mental disorders. There's much more humane treatment. Now today, the treatment of mental disorders is divided into two schools, psychiatry and psychology. Most MD psychiatrists rely on drug treatment, while psychologists use talk theory.
Therapy.
Talk therapy, yes. One-sided drug treatment without psychological therapy is materialistic, it's mechanistic, and it's reductionist. And the most commonly used drugs are antidepressants in the SSRI family and sedatives such as diazepam.
A review of SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. No wonder they just call them SSRIs. So in an article called Antidepressants Associated with Sexual Dysfunction, Impact and Effects and Treatment. This is on PMC. We'll give the link in discussions. They reported that 58% of patients reported sexual side effects from taking these antidepressants. The common symptoms range from decreased sexual desire, decrease in sexual function, delayed orgasm, impotence, and delayed ejaculation problems. What do you think Freud and Wilhelm Reich and Carl Jung would have to say about suppressing libido like this? I wonder. I have some ideas, but maybe I shouldn't talk about them right here, right now, or it would take half the night. So we'll leave it up to you to think about it, to question it, to inquire.
All right, I have some modern figures here showing how many people are taking antidepressants, and it's really quite shocking. Okay, this is from an article called Antidepressants Used Among Adults. The CDC reported that 13.2% of adults 18 years and older take antidepressant drugs. The figures are about twice as high for women as they are for men, 17.7% women, 8.4% men. The use of antidepressants increases with age. The highest use is among women over 65, and their percentage is put at 24.3%. That means almost a quarter of women over 65 are taking antidepressants.
Why is that?
Yeah, well, the question we have to ask is
why?
Why
is that?
Are people's lives that miserable?
Is the stress from physical and mental stressors so high that it's hard for anyone to maintain?
That's a good question.
When I saw that statistic, I just really felt sad. Imagine it. Just because you're 65 and over, you have to be given antidepressants? What is going on? What is going on?
That's a very sad thing.
Why are we seeing all this? I mean, most of these people are suffering from the stress center. There may be a few that have true chemical imbalances, but it comes down to this thing again about, does the brain produce consciousness and affect emotion, or does emotion and consciousness affect the body? So actually it's both. It can go either way. From top down or bottom up, doesn't matter. The instinctive vital force, when it freaks out, trouble comes. And if you don't know how to unstress yourself, you don't change your lifestyle, you don't get some decent counseling, some people may even need drugs, but not a lifelong, you become 65 and for the rest of your life you have to take antidepressants. There must be a better way. There really must be a better way.
Right, then we have some figures about the use of benzodiazepines.
Oh, yes. Anxiety and insomnia. I mean, how many people don't have anxiety and don't have trouble sleeping sometimes. I mean, who, as I said one time before, I mean, who can be free of all this? Was that million-year-old naked monkey prepared for this in 100 years? Is it not right that it's objecting? But do we hear its message? Does the reason-gifted Geist, the pure intelligence, the clear intellect, realize what's going on? Or does the lower mind continue with this unsustainable, rapid development based on an unsustainable philosophical, economic, and you're dealing with giant industries, military industrial, the pharmaceutical industrial. What are we to do? Maybe collectively we can do something, one by one. Individually we can take care of the people close to us. Collectively we can join the movement. What's the movement? Well, it's hard to tell these days what's going up or down. We're all caught on the wheel of life, they say in Asia. Up and down you go, round and round. Where it stops, nobody knows. But we have to know, and that's what the symbol of Apollo is all about. And what's the most important thing? To know yourself. If everyone knew theirself, we wouldn't have any problem. If everyone used inquiry to look into things, there'd be no trouble. But as it stands, the lower aspect of mind, there's no one word in German for mind. You have the Geist and Gemut, which is like the intelligence, the pure intellect. Not intellectual like somebody who thinks they know everything and they're thinking all the time. We mean pure intellect, pure intelligence. And the Gemut is the emotional disposition. So balance between your intellect and your emotions is really important. Some of it's going too far towards the intellect, to where the word intellectual almost means a bad thing to some people. Others are so deeply into their emotional that they're just so emotional you can't, talk anything real to them. And they blame this on the left and the right and the up and the down and the in and the out. But one thing's always true: big front, big back. Remember that. Where are we, Jill?
Okay, yes, I just had some of the figures about benzodiazepines. This was a study of 59,912 persons.
That's a lot of people.
15% of the patients had taken benzodiazepines in the last 30 days, mostly prescribed for anxiety and insomnia. Also, what this study uncovered, it's got a long title here, I'll read it. Benzodiazepines prescribed more frequently to patients already at risk for benzodiazepine-related adverse events in primary care. This is PubMed.
So not only are these drugs addictive, but they're given to a group of people who have a higher risk of adverse reactions and obviously addiction, substance problems. People are anxious. The doctor won't give them anything the guy in the street corner might. God knows what they're taking. Fentanyl? Who knows? So many people are dying. It's all unnecessary. It's all unnecessary. Hahnemann knew it, and I don't know what he'd say about our situation today. But we can do our best to carry on with the reforms in the name of the great reformer. So I've put the links in the description now, so you can just click on it and go to the sites that have the information. Let's see the original studies. Be my guest.
All right, well, we've been talking about medicines, so now we're going to look at what Hahnemann wanted to do to reform the materia medica. This is exactly what we've been talking about. So, now, in Hahnemann's time, one of the most influential doctors was a Scottish doctor called William Cullen. He lived from 1773 to 1790. He was a physician, a surgeon, and a chemist. He was involved in the Scottish Enlightenment, and he was a teacher of the naturalistic philosophy. He was doctor to David Hume, the great philosopher, and Cullen tried to bring nosology up to date for his time and modernized medicine. He was a very famous and well-regarded doctor of his time.
He was a philanthropist, and he was a great man. And many of his disciples spread out all over the world, spreading modern medicine. And Cullen himself dedicated a lot of time to treating the poor. A very influential character. And Hahnemann was well aware of his works, obviously.
So in 1798, Cullen published a very influential work called A Treatise on Materia Medica. And Hahnemann, as part of his translation work, he translated this work into German. Now, Hahnemann was critical of some of Cullen's approaches. He was critical of his use of pathological names for diseases, and by putting his medicines with titles like tonics, astringents, purgatives, emanagogues, febrifuge, that sort of thing. Hahnemann also thought that just the properties like colour, taste and smell, although interesting, were not sufficient to base prescriptions on.
Cullen wrote extensively on Peruvian bark, China, which we have in the homeopathic materia medica. And he used it as a specific for intermittent fever, many of which may have been caused by malaria. He proposed China works because it was a stomach tonic and astringent and had bitter taste. Hahnemann actually proved China on himself. He took tincture several times a day, and he developed the symptoms of intermittent fever over a period of weeks. And he wrote, Peruvian bark, which is used as a remedy for intermittent fever, acts because it can produce symptoms similar to those of intermittent fever in healthy people. This was the first proving, the first modern proving. I talked about Shen Nug and his provings, and I have some other stories too, but I'll save them for later. But in the modern age, Hahnemann did things that nobody ever did, even the great emperor. He went beyond the great emperor in some ways. So, Peruvian bark, very interesting.
So this is where we see Hahnemann originating a pure materia medica based on the real symptoms that you could find out by testing on a healthy human being. And so this takes us all the way, in fact, up to the first Organon. So we've seen how he wants to reform everything. Everything, all right?
Especially himself.
Yes. So now we get to the first Organon, where he's going to lay out his whole system, his whole new system. This is the complete picture and all the reforms put together. So the word homeopathy, when did this first happen? Hahnemann, in 1807, Hahnemann published an article called Indications of the Homeopathic Employment of Medicines in Ordinary Practice. And in this article, he introduced the term homeopathy.
That was in 1807.
And this work, in fact, forms a basis for the introduction to the first Organon, as well as being part of the prefaces of the second and third editions. And many of the subjects that we've talked about in the last podcasts, about the medicine of experience, that many of the subjects he talked about in medicine of experience are now formulated as aphorisms throughout the first Organon.
You have that book?
Yes.
I got a new book. I can't put it down. The Organon of the Rational Healing Art, the first Organon. Jill, read out the title page on that.
The title page, yes. This we ordered this while we were reviewing the material for this podcast, and this is just a beautiful book and rare.
Yeah, who translated all that material? Where it comes from? It's two Indian guys. Calcutta. Calcutta is like the home of homeopathy in India, and homeopathy is very big in India. And the authors were two Mr. Singhs. I don't remember the first and second name, but they did this as a centennial celebration in 2210. As a centennial celebration and commemoration, they published this tremendous work. And it actually has the German text on one page and the translation on the next page. It's really a beautiful book. Can we find the authors so we can give them credit?
Yes, Dr. Mahendra Singh, Dr. Subhas Singh. And what they have done is take an original copy from 1810 and translated it and put a facsimile of the old one on the opposite page. So you can see the original German on one side, you can see it in grey, and you can see that it's from an old copy. You can see the ragged edges at the bottom. And on this side is their really beautiful translation. And this is we were very happy to get this book. It's been a great inspiration.
Oh, I've been reading it. I've been reading it like crazy, along with the fourth Organon, the fifth Organon, and the sixth Organon. I'm back to Organon again. 4 different editions at once, and I've got the lesser writings here too. I got a new volume of that because my old ones are down in the garage in some trunks that we can't find, piled under 30 years of debris. And what's interesting about this is a lot of the things we talk about in the medicine of experience, Hahnemann's 2 maxims, etc., so many things have been integrated into aphorismic form. What is written as part of the introduction in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Organon are actually in essay form in the notes. But here, those same subjects are worked in a series of aphorisms. They're just astounding, actually. I was so amazed and surprised. I had an old copy of Wheeler's from 1910, I think, and on my computer, and it was hard to read, and Wheeler's isn't anywhere near as complete as what these gentlemen have done. They've done a tremendous job. So reading these aphorisms, it's so much of what I've been trying to explain in these podcasts are in these aphorisms, and I've just been gobbling them up day and night. So you need the book, yes.
Yes, so now we're going to show a chart that sums up the essence of the first Organon. The first Organon is very focused on the constitutional view. So here's a nice, neat little diagram that shows the main essence. The living organism is a complete unity. A unity where every power, sensation, and function sympathizes simultaneously. Vital unity does not permit local diseases to exist separate from the whole. Nature produces singular diseases that need individualized treatment.
Okay, that's a wonderful little circle. That's a complete circle. He squared the circle. And when I looked at the aphorisms in the first Organon, all together as a group, I noticed that aphorism 3 in the first Organon was the threefold vision itself, done in much greater detail. And he added the subjects of posology and removing obstacles to the cure onto the second part of the aphorism. And the threefold vision of the medicine of experience was integrated into aphorism 3, and all 6 editions kept the same aphorism. So, aphorism 38 of the first Organon, Hahnemann reviews the threefold knowledges in detail with the addition of the subjects of posology and removing obstacles to the cure. In aphorism 39, he states that nature produces individual diseases, which is an interesting idea. He said even when there's 2 diseases due to the particular balance in the body, that they had to be treated as an individual because they created a third force. So this third piece would be contained in the totality of the symptoms, whether it was an individual singular or even if it was somewhat complex. There are certain exceptions, we'll get to that later. Okay, so nature produces individual diseases, calling for individual remedies. Classifications can be misleading. Aphorism 40, well, you can imagine what he said about classifications, okay? One-sided classifications, and he was a great classifier himself. And actually, from the 4th, 5th, and 6th Organon and the watershed years, he wrote a lot about a homeopathic view of causation. At first, he was just refuting the old school's view of causation and how ridiculous it was, and pointing out that the mysterious interiors were too difficult to perceive with any surety. There was always the uncertainty principle, like modern physics. There's always something there you don't know. And you have to figure that there is this unknown factor in everything you do, that there is no perfect knowledge in that way. So, classifications can be misleading, aphorism 40. Then he goes on about the use of general and local titles. And you can imagine, that was in aphorism 41. You can imagine what he had to say about that. The idea that there was a local disease. And he stressed this whole idea of local and constitutional and their difference in aphorism 42, which, could you put up the slide, please?
Okay, this is aphorism 42 of the first Organon and pretty much sums up a lot of what he was trying to say. But the human organism in its living state is a complete whole, a unity. Every sensation, every manifestation of power, every affinity of the component parts of one part is intimately associated with the sensations, the functions, and the affinities of the component parts of all other parts. No part can suffer without all other parts sympathizing and simultaneously undergoing more or less change.
Aphorism 42 is followed by aphorism 43. And in these aphorisms, Hahnemann stresses the unity of the human organism, the unitary function of the vital powers, the unitary nature of most diseases. So again, in aphorism 44, 45, and 46, he says, basically, classification is an unsatisfactory, at his time, unsatisfactory. It wasn't that he didn't believe in some types of classifications, but he didn't want it based on sheer speculation of some sort of causal element that was superior to all other causes and all other symptoms. And if you remove the cause, that's all you need to do. And he was saying, look, you have to remove the symptoms, because in many cases the cause is already gone. What's the cause? You fell on your head. What's the symptoms? You've never been well since. Is the cause still there? You fall on your head every day? No, you fell on your head one time. And you got emotional disorders from it, emotional disorders, which reminds you of natron sulfate and other such remedies. But anyway, you get the idea. He wasn't saying that there are no causes to anything, but he was saying, let's not be foolish about causation. Okay, so individualization is the most important factor. Aphorism 47. Now, very Hahnemannian, he points out that there are exceptions to this rule. And he pointed out that the fixed, unchanging miasms were a collective disorder. Not an individual disorder, but a collective disorder. And he gives examples in aphorism 49 of infectious miasms.
Yes. Here we go. Plague of the Levant, smallpox, measles, scarlet fever, venereal disease, the itch, rabies, whooping cough, plica polonica, etc.
Now later, Hahnemann would classify those diseases. Right there, he just gave a list. But later, as time developed, especially from the time of the fourth Organon on, from that time on, he began to separate them into acute miasms, like measles, half-acute miasms, like rabies, and chronic miasms, like syphilis. So, to Hahnemann, these were infectious diseases of common cause and similar symptoms, and you could come up with near specific remedies at times, although not one remedy often cured a chronic case all the way. They may need other complementary remedies as you move through the cycle and the layers. It can be quite complicated. We'll talk about all that some other time. So, unchanging miasms, aphorism 48. Example of infectious miasms, aphorism 49. And this is the start of homeopathic epidemiology for collective infectious diseases. People don't realize this. The miasms become a classification of mental symptoms or some sort of homeomeries, some sort of divine elements even, with Kent and Hempel, and anything but infectious diseases. And it's not like they're gone. It's like antibiotics came on the scene, and everybody thought, oh, a miracle drug, we've done it, and now look what we've got. We're in a dire situation where even the best of scientists are saying these mutations, what did I say before? That with the combination of misapplied medicines and a natural disease together, that they make a potentized miasm that nature would never do by herself alone. Evolutionary biology wouldn't be mutating as fast without being stimulated by palliation and remedies that suspend and suppress. So, aphorism 50. Non-miasmic fixed diseases. Endemic and endemic diseases not yet proven to be miasms, and diseases due to localities. Can you read the list?
Yes, we have some examples here. Autumnal marsh fever, yellow fever, sea scurvy, pian, yaws, the Sibbons, pellagra, etc.
So you can see some of those are acute miasms. Yellow fever. But look at, he's got scurvy there. It's a vitamin C deficiency. I think pellagra is B vitamin deficiency.
I believe so.
Okay. So you can see right then that he hadn't separated those all out. He did a better job in 1817 in the examination of the common sources of materia medica. Maybe I'm closer this time than last time. In there, he had 4 distinct categories of collective disorders: traumatic injuries, endemic nutritional deficiencies, miasms. That's 3. What's the 4th one, Jill? And we don't have it written down. Let me see.
Yes, I don't have it written down.
Traumas, miasms, endemic nutritional disorders, and the mystery disease for the moment. All right, so in aphorism 50, he gave those examples. And you could see he still was working on classifications, homeopathic classifications, homeopathic epidemiology, homeopathic nutrition, treatment of traumas. The other one, localities, diseases caused by localities. He mentioned iodine deficiency in spongia, and later he actually extracted iodine from spongia and introduced it as a remedy itself. I remembered. What do you know? Okay, so where am I then?
We're on aphorism 50, and we've done of those ones that are related to certain localities and climatic conditions.
So
now there is another group here that they may come from a single cause, or there may be a combination of different causes. They're not infectious, but they have fairly fixed symptoms. He mentions gout, membranous croup, and asthma as examples of those type.
Okay, those are pathological generals. So they must be individualized by the totality of the symptoms also. The constitutional concomitants is what Jar called them. You may have a pathogenic symptom like gout, but no 2 constitutions with gout have the same symptoms. No, they don't have the same thoughts. No, there's no 2 human beings that are the same. We're like snowflakes. We're all made of H2O, and so many different crystalline forms. So pathological generals must be filled out with symptoms. And he suggested calling such diseases a kind of, like a kind of gout. Which kind of gout? A colchicum kind. Maybe a lycopodium kind. So when he's used pathological terms like diabetes, he said, say a kind of diabetes. What kind? The individual patient's kind of diabetes. What remedy? The individual remedy for that patient. So Hahnemann, right there in the introduction, when we read that first line of the introduction to the 5th, 6th Organon, I don't think it was in the 4th, where he talks about diseases, both physical and psychical, being of the individual and collective nature. So right there, he set the template. It's like Einstein in physics. In his day, couldn't imagine going to the moon, but they needed his theories to go to the moon. So Einstein is the founder of modern physics, like Hahnemann is the founder of the medicine of the future, what Herring called De Medicina Futura. So, final thoughts in closing. Jill, you want to close us out?
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I think that's about it for now. And we've certainly seen how Hahnemann really was a great reformer, and that we're still trying to catch up with him in many ways. I want to thank you all for listening, and to remind you to please like our channel, subscribe to our channel, and to follow the links given in the description below. We do appreciate your comments. Some people have sent us some very nice comments. We appreciate it. Please send us some more.
That's why the links are below.
That's why the links are below. So, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Final thoughts. Bye-bye from Jill, but I have a few more things to say. Read the Organon. You can't practice homeopathy without reading the Organon. When I started out, we didn't read it actually very much. In fact, the first time I read it, I was totally enamored with the vital force and vital principle, and totally confused about when you start talking about artificial diseases being medicine. But we've explained that enough now, I think, that everyone knows the idea that he was observing nature and the nature of diseases. He makes list after list of observations from the old school about different types of diseases and their sequels. And that's what brought him to the whole idea that similar is cured. So the natural, artificial disease oppose each other, and that one replaces the other. The stronger replaces the weak. If the disease is strong and you pick a weak remedy that's not addressing the totality of the symptoms, then the disease is a stronger force and it doesn't go anywhere. Unless it's suppressed, palliated, suspended, etc., 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 by improper medicines. So, the vital force reacts to the artificial disease that has already replaced the natural disease. Fascinating ideas that, like I said, are not that popular anymore, but the first Organon is based on these things. It's really worth a read. I highly recommend getting it. I hear that these gentlemen are going to publish a 4th edition. And if it's of this quality, it'll just be fantastic, because right now I'm using the variant copy on a computer and a PDF, and I'd really love to have the books. I love the books. Lesser Writings, you've been through that. Medicine of Experience, in here. For those of you who really like to dig, this is a great work, the Lesser Writings. It's a bit dense at times. So that's my final thoughts. We're all trying to do the medicine of experience. So let's get some experience. First comes ethics, then comes wisdom. And that's all I have to say for this podcast. Thank you so much. Hope to see you again sometime. Bye-bye.
Bye.